The Wednesday Bookmark on Family Radio CHRI. Each week we introduce you to something new, something that'll make you think, something that might change your life. Here's this week's author interview on the Wednesday Bookmark on Family Radio CHRI.
Joining us this morning for the Wednesday Bookmark is Annie F. Downs. Annie is a best-selling author, nationally known speaker, and co-host of the popular podcast, That Sounds Fun. She's based in Nashville. We're going to talk this morning about her book, That Sounds Fun, The Joys of Being an Amateur, The Power of Falling in Love, and Why You Need a Hobby. Annie, so appreciate your time this morning.
Hi, Brad. Good morning. I'm glad to get to chat with you.
You were lucky enough to grow up on the same 18 acres where your mother grew up and your grandparents lived on the land as well. I get the sense, Annie, that you still long for that place. What was Annie's childhood like?
Oh, yeah. I mean, my parents actually lived there until about 3 years ago. And so for my entire life, my first 30-plus years of my life, our whole family life operated on this one spot of land. And I guess I didn't even realize how connected I felt to it until they were moving. And, I had moved away. I grew up outside of Atlanta, Georgia, and I had moved to Nashville, Tennessee, 10 years ago. So it wasn't a moving thing. It was what is it about what I remember here and what I'm connected to here that I'm having a harder time than I realized letting go. And so, it was such a journey, Brock, over the year and a half of my parents deciding to sell and deciding to move and going to a new place of me figuring out what is this about me that feels so connected to my childhood that, I grew up seeing my grandparents every day. I was an angry 13-year-old who moved out of my parents' house for one night and lived with my grandparents. I just grew up with that life all the time. And so it even felt like when my parents moved away, though my grandparents had been gone for years, it felt like a loss all over again.
You point out that the actual definition of amateur is much better than the meaning that we tend to ascribe to it. And I just thought that was such a great point. What does being an amateur mean to you?
Well, I think for a lot of us, Brock, we use that word with a very negative connotation. Or people say, "Oh, amateur hour," because you've messed up or you got on the wrong bus or whatever. And the actual definition is far more kind and far more friendly of what is being an amateur. According to the definition, being an amateur is far more about trying new things and being okay when you're not a professional at something. I mean, it's not a negative word. It's just the opposite of professional. The things you do professionally are what you get paid for, you should be good at. We've got to have more things in our lives and more conversations and more relationships where we allow ourselves to be an amateur, to be new, to give ourselves permission. I mean, you and I were just talking about the pandemic a few minutes ago. One of the things we need to do for ourselves and each other is remember that we've never done this before. We're very amateur at having a year like we just had. And so our expectations of ourselves should be at a level that says, I've never done this before, I'm learning.
That's such a good thought. Okay, this is a bit of a selfish question, Annie, but since you've been...
I'm ready.
You've been to both Disneyland and Dollywood, so I just have to ask you, which one is better?
Oh, gosh, I wish that was a simple answer, but Disneyland is magical and connects to my childhood, and it's so many people love it, but Dollywood, Dolly Parton's amusement park, is an entirely different thing. It is incredibly fun. It just connects to a different part of my life. It's in the Smoky Mountains in East Tennessee. It has some really fun roller coasters. So the answer, as you cannot be surprised about a person who wrote a book about fun, the answer is both. I like them both, but you need to experience them both, Brock.
Perhaps less fun than Disneyland or Dollywood, but no less meaningful. You once enrolled in the Living Centered program, it's called, at a place called OnSite. Tell us about OnSite and what your time there meant to you.
Yeah, you're right. I mean, it was a roller coaster in its own right, wasn't it? I'm a big fan of counseling, of therapy, I love the idea that we get to have someone who's a professional speak into our emotional growth. And that's what OnSite offers is a lot. The Living Center program particularly is a couple of days where you go and kind of unplug from the world and you work through some of your story and you leave with tools and language for some of the things that you've been through in your life that you may not have had tools and language around before. So it's a version of counseling, but it's different. It's more experiential. It's more getting into your own story. And I was afraid to go. I write about it, and that sounds fun. I was so afraid to go, but the payoff and the growth and the change I've seen in my life in the last couple of years because of that investment has been priceless.
To me, one of the more poignant moments in the book is when you talk about taking things such as buying a house, for example, off of your "that'll be fun when I get married" shelf and bringing them down to the "let's just do this now" shelf. Do you think there's a temptation among singles to put too many big life decisions kind of on pause?
I do. I mean, I think all of us can, even for our married friends, everybody can remember when they weren't married. And there are all these things that you think, well, I want to see Italy, but I'll wait until it's a romantic trip. Or I want to buy a house, but I'll wait until I have a family. And there are those things. There are some things that are far better served for you and for your partner if you do them in marriage. And of course, a trip to Italy is awesome and romantic and would be so fun with a partner. But I just wonder how many things, dreams and hopes and plans we put aside because we think we can't do them until we get the next thing, whether that's marriage or kids or enough money in our bank account or move to a different city. And so I just wonder if there are things we go, wait, why am I waiting to do that? Am I waiting to do that because it's right? Or am I waiting to do that for a reason that culture has told me and that actually isn't a reason to wait?
Yeah, so true. Speaking of domesticated things, you had a puppy for 6 days and only 6 days. What happened? You got to tell us that story.
Oh, it's so sad. It's one of the worst chapters in the book. It really still breaks my heart. I ended up being allergic to it, even though I thought I had done all my research and I thought I had prepared. But I needed that story to happen. I needed this moment, and I tell about it, and that sounds fun. I needed to know I could love like that I could give my life to something that wakes up in the middle of the night. Since I'm not married yet and don't have kids yet, I hadn't experienced that in that profound a way. And so when I'm writing a book about fun, I know it's strange to include a chapter about therapy and a chapter about loss of a puppy, but to me, those things have to go together. We have to hold our joy and our sadnesses at the same time. They really serve us best when we remember them both.
Yeah, but the way you tell that puppy story in the book is pretty entertaining.
Oh, good. Okay, good. It's also pretty sad.
Yeah.
But I'm glad. I mean, when I read the audiobook, I cried the whole way through that chapter.
So last question for you, Annie. What do you want readers of this book to feel as they finish the final page of the book?
Oh, that's a great question, Brock. My hope is that readers will feel like if they didn't know me before, that they have a friend, that they've made a new friend by hearing my story and by just spending the amount of time you spend with an author when you read their books or listen to their audiobook. And so I hope they feel like they have a friend, and I hope they really think about the life they have today and what kind of fun might already exist in their life. Fun really opens you up to vulnerability and to connectivity and to relationship and to God, I think. And so the time it takes to sit and think about that, I think that's my hope, is that readers will actually do that.
This is a wildly fun book to read, but also it's thoughtful, it's poignant. Again, the book we've been talking about is called That Sounds Fun: The Joys of Being an Amateur, the Power of Falling in Love, and Why You Need a Hobby. Annie F. Downs, our guest this week for the Wednesday Bookmark. I super enjoyed the book, Annie. Thanks so much for your time this morning.
Thank you, Brock. That means a lot to me. I really appreciate you.
The Wednesday Bookmark on Family Radio CHRI. To find out more about this week's bookmark or hear the author interview again or to discover previous books highlighted on the Wednesday Bookmark, visit bookmark.chri.ca.